close to everything was around 18,000.
Oh, my God.
And so I think they had a permit. The permit allowed them to go down to 21 total, and that includes, of course, the depth of the water. And so they were. It's quite far down.
They have scarred the planet on this one.
It's a real bad situation. George, there's a lot of things that mariners are talking about, and people are talking about. What can we do to stop this from happening again? And I think one of the first things, from my perspective, is to require that all these drilling rigs that are drilling in the U.S. Be registered, U.S. flag, and have U.S. mariners on board and be subject to U.S. Coast Guard inspections and U.S. law. There was a lot of people don't know this, but one of the big questions that came out of the hearings in Louisiana was who was in charge at the time this disaster began.
Kelly, they're not even protecting our borders. They're not going to do this.
Well, they have to do something, George, because business as usual is not going to cut it anymore.
Well, I agree with that. Let's go to Glen Carbon, Illinois, east of the Rockies. Hey, Tim, go ahead.
Hi, George.
Hi.
Hi, Tim.
I had a question. Before they went into this project, I'm sure, or at least I think I'm sure, that there were estimates of the volume of crude that was in this reserve. Do you have any idea? In other words, if they don't fix this thing, which it looks like they're never going to be able to.
When does it run?
How much crude is going to ultimately be released? And
well, if
are we going to be destroying parts of the Atlantic Ocean? And
sure, if you believe in the abiotic oil theory, this thing could last almost indefinitely.
Oh, God, that's a terrible thought. I mean, that's a terrible thought. But how much for the actual, they do, what they do is that when they do surveys, they have, they put out explosives, they set them off at the bottom, and they kind of measure, they kind of track it. I have a friend who's a captain on a seismic ship that does this. And that's kind of how they have it's nothing more than an approximation of how much is underneath there. And so how much what they said for this actual lease, I don't know, but there are a number of other drilling rigs that are drilling out of the same pool that the Deepwater Horizon was. It wasn't the only rig in that pool of oil. There's a number of others that are also drilling there right now.
All right, Tim, thanks for your call. Let's go to next. Wildcard line, Houston, Ernest. You're up.
George, Captain.
Boy, Ernest, thank you.
I heard through the grapevine the blowout valve had a dead battery, and I heard maybe 2 or 3 men try to use the hand crank to close that blowout valve. That's what rumors I heard. Now, a lot of 2 of my friends that were on that rig, they were afraid to go back to that rig. I mean, totally afraid. Now, what they're planning to do is, those 2 wells, they're going to go, one is going to go below the other.
Like slant drilling?
Slant drilling, and they're going to hit one above the other. And one is going to suck the oil out, and the other one on top is going to fill it in with concrete and whatever else they can fill it in. They're going to try it.
I bet, Kelly, that BP's trying to figure out a way they can preserve that oil well.
Well, I don't think they've come out and said that they're going to, once they get this thing stopped, they're going to cap it and not go back in there, but just because.
You believe that?
Well, I think that, they said it, so a lot of people are going to be watching to see if they do it. But it's interesting about that blowout preventer that because this was registered foreign in the Marshall Islands, the Marshall Islands administration hired third-party private contractors to do the inspections on the rig. And the blowout preventer, which is the thing that's supposed to stop, it's a fail-safe, that if there's a problem, it's supposed to stop it. The last time that was inspected was in 2005, almost 5 years before this disaster occurred. And I personally believe that if it had been registered in the United States, it would have been a year, inspection. It would have been much more frequent than maybe even more than that. 5 years. 2005 was the last time that it was physically inspected.
Let's go to Sacramento. Bob's up with us, first-time caller. Hi, Bob.
Hi, George. I have a question for Captain Sweeny.
Yes.
Hi, Bob. How are you?
Fine, thank you. I'll tell you, Captain Sweeny, I'm worried that no one's even confronting the greatest potential of damage that this can bring about. I've heard no one discuss it, no one bring up. They keep talking about the fisheries and the swamps and the meadows and maybe ruining the beaches in Delaware or North Carolina or something. But I think there's a much worse fate if this thing is not capped soon. And that is that I've read many times, I'm not a scientist or anything, although I am degreed in engineering, but it seems to me, I've read many times that when the Arctic ice melts, for example, and I've heard another theory that there was actually an extra Great Lake once, and then an earthquake broke it, and all that fresh water ran into the Gulf Stream, that when that pure water, because of the different viscosity it has versus the salt, it changes the ratio of fresh water to salt. Now, if this oil with its viscosity gets caught into the jet stream, I fear that it will bring an ice age on within months.
Wow.
Now, I wonder, the reason I mention this is because I don't hear it being discussed, and yet I know you must have access to the people where you can bring this up.
Well, that's certainly very interesting and kind of a worrisome, more than a worrisome thought about having it get caught in the Gulf Stream.
We would have to have more oil spill, and I think this would have to go on for months and months before we'd see it affect the climate. But he is right. If something affects the currents we go into the El Nino, El Niña stage again, who knows what could happen?
Well, one thing that they are admitting is that it's very likely that the oil in the Gulf that's on top, in the surface, is going to affect hurricane season because of just what he's talking about. The change of the temperature and it's affecting the water, which of course is one of the factors for how hurricanes move, through the Gulf Stream, affected by the Gulf Stream. That the oil on top is definitely going to have an effect on the hurricane in the hurricane season, and so that's definitely one of the wild cards. So there's something to that.
Let's go to Indianapolis, Indiana. Andrew on the wild card line. Good morning, Andrew.
Hey,